Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Joe, thanks for sitting down with me.
Pleasure.
It'd be really hard to start this without talking about some of the ETF news. So why don't you kind of catch us up on what you've been hearing in just the last 12 hours or so?
Well, there might be good news. So we've been tracking the Bitcoin spot ETF evolution, which has been an inflection point for our ecosystem, and the more negative trajectory of the Ethereum spot ETFs, we were pretty confident. Many knowledgeable people in the space were very confident that we were not going to see the SEC in the US approve the 10 Ether spot ETF applications starting on March 23rd, 24th, et cetera. And it looked like there were nefarious activities and gaslighting and just some bizarre arguments that were being constructed by the SEC, maybe behind closed doors, to try to figure out a way to slow the ETFs or make them unapprovable. But there's been a lot of activity in the last couple of weeks in our ecosystem. One, Consensus sued the SEC to get some clarity on how the SEC is internally classifying Ether.
It'd be nice if that weren't necessary.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice if there was open discussion and clear rulemaking from your prudential regulator. But that hasn't been the case. And so a lot of activity from us and others has caught the attention of our ecosystem, certainly. Journalists, thank you, and regulators and legislators. A regulator, I think, head of strategy of the SEC just quit. Interesting news. And in the US, the Republican Party's been closely tracking our ecosystem. Really, the presidential campaign and other Republicans are tracking us very closely. There are many in the Democratic Party that are heavily in favor of this technology and very positively vocal about the technology. And so it's now becoming a pretty giant election issue. And in elections that are won or lost by 1% or 2%, when you are doing things that are harming 30, 40, and growing percent of the American population because they're either holding digital assets or they care about the technology for some reason, then you've got to sort of rethink your strategy. And so both sides of the American political divide are rethinking their strategy. And somebody very recently, I think, whispered in Chair Gensler's ear and said, maybe you should take a different approach to all of this. And so we've seen a flurry of activity. We became aware of it yesterday morning. I was speaking with one of our lawyers, a guy named Bill Hughes, and he had some contacts, and he said something is going on, and it sounds positive. So we heard that yesterday morning, and it sort of ramified by last night in Berlin as a bunch of spikes in some prediction markets, and then spikes in crypto markets. So hopefully great news. We're certain to get Ether spot ETFs by 2025, and maybe even this month, and that'll just open up a floodgate that is likely to change a lot of things. There's already been a huge bit of number go up. But I want to, just kind of be mindful of the fact we're not sitting in a room full of traders necessarily. We're sitting in a room full of people who are building. So how might an ETF approval start to change things for the ecosystem, the people who are building? So an ETF approval will bring a giant amount of capital and attention into our ecosystem. In the Bitcoin space, there's a huge amount of capital. And that capital isn't really staked. It's a uncorrelated digital asset, very financial in nature, a kind of money. In the Ethereum ecosystem, it's a work token, and it is staked or uses a security bond in lots of different contexts, including the Ethereum protocol. And so having a lot of attention and having much more capital in the ecosystem is great for builders. And other than that, it hopefully, and what we're trying to achieve is that it shouldn't change anything. Software developers in the US and in the world should not be looking over their shoulder, worrying if they build software, would they have to register with FINRA or with the SEC in the US as a broker-dealer? That's just preposterous.
Right.
The SEC in the US has a mandate to regulate securities, and they're supposed to do it in a merit-neutral fashion. So if somebody wants to start a papaya juice company, and Chair Gensler feels like, hey, their formula for papaya juice has too much sugar, and that's not healthy for people. Sure. So they shouldn't be able to make those sorts of merit judgments. He shouldn't go on CNBC and say that this technology is just too volatile. Stay away from it, it's bad.
Yeah.
So yes, mandate to regulate securities, not mandated to regulate technology. When we were asked to put together lists of software developers who worked on 1559 or the merge or other things, when we became aware that the SEC was subpoenaing software developers in different companies and even scrutinizing independent software developers who were working on the protocol, we got very alarmed. And so we took this action, suing the SEC to get some clarity on how they were interpreting Ether, the classification of Ether, and it did become clear that they had internally decided to reclassify it as a security without telling anybody, and then using sequenced strategic enforcement actions, tried to, regulate by FUD, scare people, and so if MetaMask was in fact forced to register as a broker-dealer, so a piece of software that enables you to create and hold your private keys and exercise your digital authority in Web3 applications, but doesn't custody any assets. So if that thing is a broker-dealer, or if we and that thing are a broker-dealer, we don't really know what it means to register as a broker-dealer for a piece of software. We don't even know whether anybody in the audience, for instance, who downloaded MetaMask would themselves, them and their MetaMask would have to register as a broker-dealer. So it's just nonsensical.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it will hopefully remain as a historical footnote that the SEC once secretly considered Ether to be a security. They tried to punish lots of companies. They tried to make it illegal to buy and sell this unregistered security because I think there's only one entity that Chair Gensler would deem acceptable to buy and sell Ether, and that's this bizarre company called Prometheum.
Yes.
Interesting name.
Sure.
Prometheum. It's like good Ethereum or something like that.
It ought to mean that, yes.
You can't make this stuff up.
I know.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
And so I believe we are in the process of avoiding that bizarro world, and software developers can just be software developers.
Yeah. So on the road to hopefully kind of averting, things being that way where people have to figure out how to register as broker-dealers, what can developers and, builders do now to protect themselves? It could be that we see more turbulence before this all gets cleared up and nobody's trying to go after a software developer. What kind of precautions can people take now to be safe?
I think it's crazy that anyone has to ask what sort of precautions a software developer has to take to protect themselves. Get some antivirus software for their laptops. This shouldn't be an issue, and I think we're going in the right direction. I think so. Maybe on the other side, I have some thoughts. I think things are going to get so weird and interesting when people in the general population, so our technology, our ecosystem is to the point where usability is getting better and scalability is getting quite significant. On the internet, if you add a new computer, you're adding more throughput. You might have really good latency there or not, but that's under your control. In the Ethereum, the Metropolitan Ethereum ecosystem, we're now horizontally scalable and vertically scalable, and so we can improve the protocol at the base level, making it more vertically scalable. We can add new networks, layer 2s, layer 3s, layer 4s, et cetera. And so we can add infinite throughput, transaction throughput over time, and it's going to take a while. We're going to keep bumping up against the capacity transactions per second as we build more and more applications and they go viral, et cetera. But we're now in this infinite scaling period, and that's the paradigm shift that we all signed up for, that we're all excited about. And so if this set of ETFs get approved, the supply-demand dynamics get a little bit weird because there isn't a lot of ether out there that isn't already being utilized in the protocol. And so if there's too much demand from these ETFs, it could cause supply-demand imbalances, let's call them, which could affect the price quite significantly, bringing a ton more attention into our ecosystem. So that's great if it brings a lot more software developers. We have EigenLayer, we have AVSs. Companies, startups can now, instead of raising capital from a VC and then trying to figure out how to grow your community to mine, to validate, to otherwise participate in your protocol, very soon in EigenLayer you're going to be able to provision elastic security for your network. And that's just a total phase shift, a total game changer for our ecosystem. So we're at a moment in our ecosystem where there are a lot of vectors aligning for pretty tremendous growth. And so what is that going to mean? It's going to mean the paradigm shift is going to accelerate and things are going to get hopefully weird and good really soon.
I want to, this is kind of related to that, this idea that we need to scale. I want to talk a little bit about decentralization. We are sitting in the country that's the second largest represented among validators. What should builders or developers, what should teams be thinking about in how to approach or how to encourage this idea of more decentralization, better decentralization? Because I think it's still the case that, the US accounts for just shy of half of all validators.
Sure. So client diversity, this is a client diversity t-shirt.
Nice.
So we just need to remain vigilant at all times. Bitcoin, until recently, was finished and perfect, and that's great.
Sure.
But Ethereum has always been a platform for decentralized applications, and so we need to keep evolving it for usability and security and scalability and multi-dimensional fees and et cetera. And so we will continue to introduce innovations. Really smart people will continue to find weaknesses in the protocol, ways to exploit things, ways to centralize things. We'll have moments like Lido appearing too powerful. I was never concerned about that. I knew that there would be so many different ways for people to make use of their technology, and we're already seeing pretty big shifts in that space. So in terms of decentralization, I think it's all about building, identifying strengths and weaknesses in what's been built, relying on the community to be hypersensitive, to freak out on crypto Twitter about all sorts of important and immaterial things, and just to not rest, and be extremely vigilant and creative, because we need to put energy into protecting decentralization, radical decentralization, and I'm confident that we will continue to come up with solutions. We do need something like a framework that defines the many different dimensions of decentralization. I've talked about that with some academics, and there's been some work that people have done over the years. We need to define all the different dimensions, whether it's software teams, clients, protocols themselves, nation state laws, energy grids, climate systems. All these things could potentially be an attack vector or a single point of failure or weakness. So define the dimensions, figure out metrics for how we're doing along those dimensions, and continually improve, and maybe come up with one or a small number of numerical scores on how all the different protocols are doing with respect to decentralization.
And then I want to get your take on, I guess, this idea that you could try to encourage, or rather disincentivize, you could disincentivize too much centralization by looking at very large validators, and then
Disincentivize too much?
too much centralization. So say like you manage a ton of validator clients because you're very, very large. Maybe you're pooled, maybe you just have that kind of money.
It's already partly the case that you get slashed if too many of the same client are making
down
the same mistake.
I'm alluding to a blog post that Vitalik put out recently, where he was kind of putting out this idea. I don't think he was officially proposing it, but it was this idea that, like, okay, if you manage a lot of clients and you've got them all in the same spot, then surely the penalty you pay for something going down should be a bit higher than what you have a solo validator.
Yeah, so good idea in theory if you can do it cleanly. And if you can do it in a manner that isn't easy to cheat or spoof, and you can gather reliable information to make that work without forcing people to surrender too much information and disclose who they are. So
you don't want to create new risks just by trying to fight them.
So great goal, difficult to come up with a clean solution for that. So we build the Bezu client and the Teku client, and there's a graffiti field, and so excuse me, our team is working to have a tag installed in that field by default. We don't want to force people running the client to keep that tag in, but it's a little marker that can be used for people tracking client diversity to help. That said, if you prefer to run another client and you want to pretend that you're our Bezu client, then you can do that. It's if there was a way to come up with a very reliable signature on all the different clients and the different client pairs, that would be interesting. But I can't think of something that wouldn't improperly disclose information that people might not want to share.
Okay. And then I want to be mindful of the timing, because we do have enough time for a little bit of Q&A. So if anyone's got a question, if you could put your hand up, someone will find you with a microphone. I can barely see because of the lights, but
they can see better than we can.
Yeah. Or if not, I will continue. All right, I can't really see any. Okay, cool. I'll keep on. The other thing I wanted to ask you,
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask you about what you read from Alex Thorne.
Oh, yeah, sure. We can talk about that. Yeah, so I, in getting ready for this morning, saw a tweet from Alex Thorne over at Galaxy Digital. He was hypothesizing that because the SEC, like we might be getting close to the SEC approving an ETF, that the way they could thread the needle on this is that they could approve these ETFs to hold spot Ethereum, but they wouldn't make it, permissible for, they wouldn't permit anything that's going to say, okay, we're going to hold this Ethereum and then we're going to stake it and then we're going to pass those rewards on to the people who've invested in this ETF, and then that becomes, we were just talking earlier, the dirty word yield, like that's how you make some extra money off of holding this. But that's how the U.S. could try to thread the needle. And then you were sharing that there are some ETFs that do this. So like,
Yeah, so in Canada, possibly UK, Hong Kong, there are exchange-traded products that do stake the ether, and I think they keep some of the yield for themselves, and I think they pass some or all of it. In Canada, I think it's 50% they pass on to the owner of the exchange-traded product. And Alex, I guess, hypothesized or suggested, and we know that Van Eck and ARC and some others were asked to remove the yielding, the staking element from their applications a little while ago, and so some people realized that, hey, why would you do that unless a regulator was talking to you? And so there was some indication that that things might have been moving a little while ago. But why would the SEC forbid staking? There may be securities law issues, but it shouldn't be a securities law issue because you're just posting a performance guarantee so that you can devote your resources and some labor to helping the protocol operate, and you should be able to get some income from that. So there's no investment contract at all in staking Ether in the protocol. So why does the SEC want to effectively make these products less attractive? Less attractive to operate, less attractive to purchase for the consumer. And it could go to my thesis that the SEC is trying to either slow the paradigm shift, slow the growth of this technology because they might think that it's jarring for the American economy or the world economy. They may be trying to slow things so that certain financial interests or government interests can position themselves better. They may be trying to slow and co-opt or dumb down the technology. One thesis that I and others have held is that they're trying to weaken the decentralization of Ethereum in America. So they're not trying to disconnect Americans from Ethereum, but they're trying to create an SEC-approved Ether registered security, everybody registered broker-dealer kind of American Ethereum. And so maybe they're trying to slow things down and sort of co-opt the ecosystem. But,
I wanted to ask, because I know I've heard you kind of paraphrase the whole idea, like history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Do you think we're going to see things with Ethereum and this ETF getting approved, knock on wood, play out quite the same way we did with Bitcoin? I mean, we went on that crazy run after the Bitcoin ETFs got approved.
So in terms of how the SEC is going to do approvals, assuming they do, they denied Bitcoin spot ETFs for like a decade, and then were forced by the courts to approve. And I think they tried to do it in as fair a way as possible, approving them all together. I don't know if that's going to be their strategy. I don't know if they've had enough time and conversations with all the different entities so that they can get that done. So we'll see. I guess if they can get all of them done at the same time on Thursday, I guess the 23rd, then perhaps they've been working on this for a while. And in terms of what happens after, they're just, in terms of US dollar equivalent, there just isn't a lot of Ether for all of those ETFs to purchase so that they can satisfy the demand. There's probably going to be a lot of pent-up demand. Every institution that's invested in a Bitcoin spot ETF should prudently diversify into Ether unless they're religious Bitcoin maximalists, which is possible.
There's a few of those.
In some cases. But really the right thing to do, even Bitcoin maxis are probably diversified a little bit.
Yeah.
And so there's just a natural pent-up pressure, I think. And the supply-demand dynamics are going to get a little bit weird because there isn't a lot of supply of Ether.
Right.
And the more transactions that happen, the more Ether gets burned. The more Ether gets burned, the more price goes up. The more people talk about it, the more people realize, hey, this isn't just a disinflating digital asset. This is a deflationary currency. And so that's going to draw a lot of people in. So that's a positive feedback loop that could drive a bit of a frenzy. And so it's great to see what the approval of the Bitcoin spot ETFs did. I anticipate that it'll be something like it. It might be lower key. It might be much more intense. We'll see.
And then I checked this morning. The last time we saw the SEC put out this call to all, the Bitcoin applicants, say, okay, you've got to update your, I think it's the 19B4 form.
4B or
Yes,
B4,
yeah,
exactly.
one of those.
Yeah.
Like we were less than a week away from the approvals. It's hard to say if it's going to go quite that way this time because, as you were pointing out, there's so many things
asking the
in the
exchanges
area.
to approve, 2-3 days beforehand is that doesn't seem like they were on top of this issue.
No, but
this might be an emergency.
yeah. All right. I want to check again to see if there are any questions. I do see a hand this time. Okay. We've got a question right here. Yeah.
You can yell it out too.
Oh, here comes a mic, I see.
We can repeat it.
Or you
Great.
can yell.
Or you can use a microphone.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for being bullish on Ethereum.
So hard for me.
So my question is related to the thing that you said, that crypto Twitter kind of stays vigilant and checks whether we achieve decentralization. And lately there was this conversation about EF employees, getting some stake in Eigenlayer and so on.
Yeah,
And
Justin Drake.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had a great disclosure, though.
Yeah, and you are literally co-founder of Ethereum that started his own company that was very valuable for the community. And I'm wondering what's your perspective on this conflict of interest, how to manage that, and how to think about it in the first place.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was Justin or a commenter that said the people at the Ethereum Foundation are enormously talented, brilliant people, but also people of immense integrity. So I don't worry about that at all. Vitalik is an individual with more integrity in his little finger than virtually everybody else I've met, not to mention his brilliance. And so we're still in the early days of a paradigm shift. The paradigm shift is based on technology. It's based on this new invention of decentralized trust. Decentralized trust as a foundation is great. We need to build decentralized finance, and there will be so many opportunities for building good and great things or for corrupting things. And so we need to be vigilant. From the perspective of consensus, we've had a lot of great people move through the company, leave the company, start up projects. We are almost always delighted when that happens, and we almost always invest in those projects because we just want to seed the ecosystem with great and talented people, and there's so much to build. And so I wouldn't restrict anybody in the Ethereum Foundation or anybody in any company in the Ethereum ecosystem from supporting more projects, even if they're financially incentivized to do so. At Consensus, we just say, you can be an advisor, you can take some sort of compensation, just disclose it and make sure that there is no conflict of interest in any sort of decision that you're making for the company. And I'm sure the Ethereum Foundation operates similarly.
Great, and we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I think we've got one right here.
Great conversation. I'm curious maybe on your kind of like long-term bull case for Ethereum, like more as like this original thesis of the global settlement layer, tokenizing everything. Like, what do you think is the key things that stand in the way of like having the whole world like settle on Ethereum, like every aspect?
Yeah. So the only thing that stands in the way is the friction inherent in transforming a paradigm, top-down command and control, centralized trust, to this new decentralized bottom-up trust paradigm. So we've humans have lived for, organisms have lived on this planet in contexts of violence and abuse and scarcity. Scarcity mindset, or scarcity leads to a fear mindset. We're in this inflection point moment where we built the technology to get away from top-down command and control, force, etc. And we do great things when we can bring collectives together, and we need trust for that. And we now have this technology that can enable us to bring a large amount of people in some contexts or a smaller amount of people in other contexts into a context in which we can reliably trust each other, either via automated trust or social trust mechanisms that are mediated by software. And so I don't know how long it takes to heal the generations of damage that we've been living under, but we have the technology now. That's the issue. It's social. Technological scalability, et cetera, is proceeding really well. It will proceed probably as fast as it needs to, because it's the social, political elements that are going to be the frictions. And so it's a pretty exciting time to be alive. It's probably the biggest paradigm shift in human history, the trust paradigm shift.
Great. Thank you for the candid conversation today. I guess we should wrap that up now. But yeah, Stacy, Joe, thank you.
Thank you so much.